What's up, y'all? Welcome to another Dominate the Day podcast. This is episode 3, and it's entitled Building Your Foundation Why Character Comes Before Success. Why Character Comes Before Success. I'm your host. I'm Joey from Joey Talks Live, but we dominating the day on this podcast. So, I had a couple other ideas as far as different titles, different topics, but I use old ChatGPT to help me schedule out so I don't have to do too much computing or bandwidth on my own. Thank God for AI. Even though current events has me tempted to talk, but it's still kind of heavy, so I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait a couple weeks and let the Holy Spirit lead. But with that being said, I had this message, part of this message prepared for a week. No, better than that. A few months. It'll hit me when I'm driving and it'll leave. And one of the tenets, right? So building your character, right? So like building a home, like building any structure, and like building your career, it's important to start at the foundation, and at that foundation of who you are as an individual. And I'm speaking directly to the young men, but whatever human being is watching this, as you know or don't know, it's your character, right? And I have some important character traits or attributes, whichever you would prefer, for men that I found are essential, right? And typically strong leaders and great men that I've worked alongside and worked for have these either all or most of these attributes. So Joe, get to it. I will. First attribute is accountability. And I have some quick definitions to go along with it. So accountability, owning your actions and decisions without excuses. One thing I detest, and this is after I read this book called Extreme Ownership. I think I've quoted it a few times, and it was by some Navy SEALs, and they talked about if you could own your mistakes, when you own it, whether they say it or not, your subordinates, your leadership, your peers will respect you, especially when you own it without an excuse. For example, I'm late. I'm late with this podcast. That's on me. I should have been able to prepare and prevent by having different, I would say, catch-alls or whatever it may be, safeguards to make sure that I could have this out in time. That's on me. That's extreme ownership. Partial ownership, or typically you might encounter, or what I might encounter, which I don't respect, is, well, I had to work all these days. I ain't had no time. So you just got to understand. It's not their fault. It's never their fault. They deflect it. Or a common one I hear quite often. Well, what about you? It's not about them. The topic is them. But they put up the mirror. They deflect the laser beam, or they put up their Captain America shield to block that blast, because to take accountability is almost like a death blow. And I exaggerate a bit, but to me, it's a man that can't take accountability loses respect in my eyes. I look at them as weak men. No one's perfect. Least you could do is own up to your shortcomings. Accountability. This is my biggest or favorite attribute, especially at this time of my life. Integrity, which falls right into it. And I have the definition here. Integrity, doing the right thing even when nobody is watching. Man, this is a this is a big one. People might say, well, it's just a little white lie. What's a white lie? What's a white lie or a black lie? We're not even gonna get into that. But, it's a common phrase like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But every time you do that thing and you know it isn't right, it chips away at your character. It chips away at your integrity. And you'll start with, let's say, for example, I'm going to use this pen. You start with the whole pen, but then you use that little white lie, as I said earlier, and you lose a tip. And another one, you lose more. You lose more. You lose more. Until the point where you have no more integrity, you don't even know where it went. So safeguard your integrity. And it's hard when it feels like when I'm speaking to mentees, I always say, why do people lie? And I'm going to say that flows into honesty. So I'm going to capture honesty with integrity. I find that people lie out of fear and the desire to manipulate. So there's no reason to be afraid, right? Fear not, fear God. At the end of the day, that's the only man or entity you should fear. And if you manipulate and you're just a dirty human being, and can't be trusted. So integrity is a big deal. Empathy was the next one I have, and it's understanding and sharing the feelings of others. And it's a big buzzword, and some people have an issue with the word. I think it's a great word. I think if we move with empathy, it's easy to have compassion and to treat people as human beings, right? You won't lose your humanity. I think if oftentimes when we get angry and for example, I use driving quite often. If you're driving and somebody cuts you off or whatever, and you might say, oh, what are they doing? Well, have some empathy for them. Well, maybe just like how you were 2 days ago running late and you forgot the gas on, or you wasn't sure if the front door was locked, you had to rush back home, and now you're late. So now you got cut off, and now you're mad, and you want to flip the bird and do all of that. But hey, have some empathy. Hey, maybe they need to be there quicker than me. I hope they're safe. Right? It's a simple way of having empathy. Is it hard? Yes. At first. But the more you do it, the more time passes, it becomes second nature. You'll have your off days. But if you practice empathy, it's so freeing too. When you move like that, it safeguards you from allowing others to make you angry or cause you to be angry. Next, humility. And it's defined as staying teachable and serving without arrogance. It's real quick and dirty definition. But we all have arrogant people in our lives, and God forbid you have narcissists in your life. That's going to help your character development. But no one wants to be around that person, right? And I feel like some of them might behave in that manner due to childhood trauma or due to issues or insecurities that they're hiding, right? And they're shielding it with this arrogance. But as you know, I'm a Christian and my worldview is shaped by Christianity. When our Messiah walked this earth, he did so in a humble manner, and he's supposed to be our example. So humility is important to me. I'm still working on that. I think I do a decent job. And let me say this. All of these things, this is daily work, weekly work, minute by minute work. I am mastering these things day by day. I have shortcomings and setbacks on the regular. I'm not better than you, right? I'm right here in the fight with you, trying to do self-mastery of my character, just so you know. So that was humility. The next one I have listed is intestinal fortitude, the courage and grit to face hard times. Now, I shared in a podcast before, I think podcast number 2, about my experience at fire academy, and it helped me to have and gain this intestinal fortitude, and also just being in the fire service and being blessed with the opportunity to deploy and work as a contractor overseas in the war zone. Being able to look at your mortality and accept it, if that is your fate, that it could come at any day. And in reality, that could, on stateside, that's very true too. You have an intimate look of who you are and what you are, right? And what you're made of. And that today or this moment could be your last. Make the most of it. And to have a level of resolve about yourself. Courage, right? Not that you won't be afraid, but you will be able to look at your fear and complete the mission nonetheless. Which leads us to the next definition, resolve. Resolve, determination to stay the course no matter the obstacles. All right, war story, quick war story, right? Literally in the war zone. We were under attack, was March 1st, 2019, and I believe March 2nd or 3rd, we were told that we had to fill up our apparatuses fuel tanks, fill up on gas, right? For the layman, but I'm gonna say fuel because most of our apparatuses ran on diesel fuel. Some of the small motor engines, whatever, it was gas. Either way, what are you getting at? So it was mandatory that you had to ground guide your apparatus. So I was in charge of one of the crash vehicles. Let's say it was Crash 2. I think it was Crash 2. If I get the video, I'm going to put it up here. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to. You'll see. Maybe I might put the picture of it up here, right? Anyway, I had to ground guide the crash vehicle to the fuel yard. And let's say how far it was from where we were at. Let's say it was about 200 meters. 200, give or take, if I can remember. And meanwhile, there was still small arms fire coming from an area where the insurgents were attacking. And your boy ain't no hero, I'm no hero. But here's what happened. Typically, the officer in charge, so I was the crew chief in charge of the truck at the time, will sit in the vehicle and you'll have one of your firefighters walk and escort the vehicle, typically. But me, the kind of leadership I was trained to be and the kind of leader I was wanted to be was one that would put themselves at point or put themselves in harm's way and try to take care of your guys. I had a young guy. He was about 21 years old at the time, and I could tell he was nervous. I told him, get up in the truck. My other driver was like, I'll say he was in his early 30s. He was driving, and I said, I'll walk the truck. Was I afraid? Absolutely. But I knew, because I was in that capacity of leadership and the kind of leadership that was shown to me, right? I had to do it, right? It was the only option for me. Was I concerned? Yes. But I said, if somebody's going to be at risk, I'm going to put myself at risk. Let the guys go inside the truck. And that's not to say, oh, I'm better than them. That's just an example of me saying, in real time, off of my experience when I had to exemplify intestinal fortitude and have a resolve about me because I was afraid. And fortunately, long story short, we were able to get fuel and get back to the staging area without any injuries, without any near misses, but there were bullets being sent downrange and sent back towards us. But thank God we were all safe. All right, enough with the war stories. Loving. This is the last attribute. And loving is choosing compassion and kindness as the foundation of every action. So choosing compassion and kindness as the foundation of every action. I've had a lot of great leaders that had everything up till loving. They had accountability, integrity, empathy, humility, intestinal fortitude, resolve. And I'll say, yes. But they didn't know how to exemplify the loving characteristic towards their firefighters, because traditionally, I would say Western men would say if you were loving or whatever, especially in like a macho profession that's soft, or it might not be a masculine trait. But the pushback is, from a Christian worldview, my example is Christ, and Christ is the example of all of these things, and especially loving, right? He was loving towards his disciples. He was loving towards the accused when they threw the accused down and they were wanting to stone her, and then he knelt down and started to write the different sins out in the dirt. That was an act of love, as well as correction for the gentleman that wanted to stone the young lady. But that was just an example there, a small example there of the many loving actions that Christ exemplified while walking amongst us on earth. So what you getting at? I would say out of all of these things, even though my favorite one is accountability, because I see that lacking on the daily, I would say loving is the most important. So, we wrap it up. So, accountability, integrity, empathy, humility, intestinal fortitude, resolve, and loving. There are many more in the comment section. What do you think I am missing, or rather, what would you add as an attribute, a characteristic for a great man, for a good man, for a complete man? So again, after all of those are listed, I would like for the viewership to add, what do you think I missed, or what would you add, right, or supplement to the list I have. And I have a scripture before I go, and it is 1 Corinthians 16, 13, and 14. This is the NIV. Be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong, do everything in love. Again, be on your guard and stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong, do everything in love. Right? I think that captures all the different attributes that are talked about, and it gives you some scripture to reference. So again, the title of this episode was Building Your Foundation, Why Character Comes Before Success. Do I give you guys a story, and this is just off the top, about character? Give a Bible, real life or Bible? Let's go real life. I gave this example a lot. Oh, I'll give a new one. This is a better one. So, I had a cleaning company back when COVID was popping, and I got a phone call while I was at work. So I was at work, working at a clinic, and I also had my company on the side. So I had one employee, I'm not going to say his name. Shout out to him though. And he was accused of stealing someone's rent, right? So he was accused of stealing someone's rent. I was licensed and insured and bonded and all of that. So I had everything I needed to do to be able to cover the rent or whatever. I can't prove it, but I believe not the owner of this facility, but the person who cried wolf was trying to get a money play. That's what I believe. Or they could have just lost their money or had their money taken in another state or another place, rather. So this is why character counts. I took the phone call. I remember it was probably around 9 a.m., 10 a.m. And I'm like, what? And it's like, yeah, this person, this, and this, and they missed their money. They're accusing your guy. And I remember I thought for a second. I don't think 5 seconds passed by. I said, nah, not him. He had exemplified a character that I didn't even have to think he would steal. But we were accused, and that don't count for nothing. I'm in debt now. Whatever the amount of money, I don't know if it was 500 or I think it was under 1,000, but let's call it 1,000. I want to say it was 5. Let's call it 1,000. Either way, so we owe him $1,000 now, and I told her, "You have cameras, run the cameras. From the room that you guys are talking about, I don't even think the key worked for that. So it was a blessing from God, because the key that we had for that room, whenever we tried to turn the key, it would never work. And I believe, this is my belief, the good Lord knew that this was going to happen a few months from then. So when we first did try to open that door and get in that room, we realized the key didn't work for us, so we never went in that room. So she played it back, I guess 2 days later, and she was able to see that he never went in that room. That employee, I was told, was very upset and mad or whatever, because they just knew it had to be him, or that was the play to put it on him. But the video evidence showed that he was innocent. So if I didn't know he had a good character, if I didn't know he had all these different attributes I shared with you, especially integrity, right? Out of all of them, he had integrity. And I knew he wouldn't put me in that situation. And we put safeguards after that. We got a body cam. So everywhere he went, he had it live, and to protect us from allegations in the future. But with that being said, that's my real life story about, I guess I'll say 5 years ago, when my employee was able to be safeguarded, at least from any thoughts of theft or lack of integrity from me, because I knew who he was and who he has showed himself to be. You know, he was a man of integrity, and the videotape proved it. So, why'd you share that, Joe? That was to show that the importance of integrity. Some people would have just fired them off rip. Some employers will say, "Oh, you're accused of this. Boom, boom, boom. Did you do this?" And it might be like, "All right, you know what? I need this. I need to keep this contract. You're out of here." But no, that's not me. Especially if I can stand, if I know who you are, and I'm thankful to have discernment. But also, I knew what I knew, and the video held true. He was an upright guy. Still is. Shout out to you. All right, so in closing, it pays to have good character. And you just don't wake up and have it. You could be 10 with a good character. You could be 20 with it. You could be 40, 50, 60, etc. And you also could be 10 with bad character. 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. And I think I said this before. Just because you age doesn't mean you mature. It doesn't mean that your character is refined. You could be an old, corrupt fool. Let me say that again. Just because you're aged, or just because you age rather, doesn't mean that you mature. It doesn't mean that your character is refined. You could be an old, corrupt fool. So choose every day to work on your character. And just because I only shared a few here doesn't mean that you could add more. For me, these are the baseline core characteristics of an upright man. And as you know, this podcast is for young men moving into manhood and giving you advice to be able to have a successful life. With that being said, it's offering time. Thank you for spending time with your boy. And if you'd like to donate to the podcast and help to pay for some of the subscription services I have to pay for, the editing software and hosting and all of that, you can look at the links provided here, or the, what's it called? Not QVC. QR codes, right? So the QR codes, and it's Joey Talks Live if you're listening. It's Joey Talks Live, and that's for Venmo and Cash App. So you can hit me on Cash App, Joey, Joey, Talks, Talks, Live, Live. Same for Venmo, Joey, Talks, Live. And if you're watching, I'm going to put them up here. But any help, any contribution will be a blessing to your boy. So dig deep. Now, all jokes aside, thank you for watching. This was episode 3. More to come. This is a late night production. But I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to share with y'all. More to come. Comment, like, subscribe. Give me 5 stars if you are watching me on Apple, Spotify, whatever. Rate your boy. You know what I'm saying? Every little bit helps. Share this with young men. Share this with men. This is a podcast for humanity, but specifically, I'm talking to young men, the Gen Z population and young millenniums, helping them to become better men, walk into manhood, and not make the mistakes that maybe I have and some of the men I know. They can learn from the missteps and be better men, and they'll be able to dominate the day. And with that said, I'm out.